Hey, 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 what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of What's Your Issue? This is episode number 15 on the E2KG network. My name is Gascally Stamus, one of your co-hosts for tonight. Seated to my left, virtually speaking, is the
Yeah,
other co-host for this evening, Mr. Stephen Laura. How you doing, Stephen?
been great.
Good, really good. It is a Monday. It is a balmy 17 flipping degrees here, predicted to go down to 4 degrees Fahrenheit later tonight. But it's okay for us because we're sitting here by the campfire about to have a fireside chat about the week in comic books. Excuse me. So we tonight are talking about the comic books that shipped last Wednesday, the 16th of January. If you've never watched an episode of What's Your Issue before, it is a spoilery comic book review show, so we will be getting into every nook and cranny and detail of the comics as we so choose. We may, of our own volition, choose to skip certain details and maybe not necessarily reveal everything, but that's our choice. So if you haven't read the comics, I would suggest that you put this podcast down, go read your books because it's only 2 more days till New Comic Book Day, and then come right back to this here show and sit alongside us as we recant our opinions of the things that we read last week. We will do 6 comic books in the review segment and then hit up the best thing that we read last week, 1 issue a piece, making our King of the Hill selections from our stack from last week. We will continue on through our honorable mentions, which would be those comic books that we would have scored an 8.0 or above on our 10 point by half point scale. So we score comics on a scale of 1.0 to 10, going by half point steps along the way. And then we will round out the episode with a quick rundown of what books are in our pull list for the upcoming New Comic Book Day on this Wednesday, so that you have some sense of what to expect next episode. Headlining tonight's episode, Detective Comics number 996, written by Peter J. Tomasi, Doug Mahnke on pencils, Jaime Mendoza and Mark Irwin on inks, and colors by David Barron, letters by Rob Lay. So read a lot of Batman as we round out the end of the year and head into next year. And so we come into this issue coming off the events of last week, where we saw Wayne Manor itself assaulted. Alfred, and I'm sorry, I'm getting the comic books mixed up. And this is part of the problem. We've got Batman, we've got Detective Comics, and we have the Joker Who Laughs. So last week in Detective, Leslie, help me out, Stephen, because you're much more familiar with this character than I am. Leslie
Tompkins. Yeah.
Leslie Tompkins was supposedly killed on screen. Alfred was attacked. We open up this issue with Damian having been called in, as Alfred suggested for Bruce to do at the end of last issue, to come in and repair his punctured lung. I actually really liked the story in this issue. And I apologize. We actually open with a 9-panel page spread of many of Batman's rogues, Tweedledee, Tweedledum, Mr. Freeze, Two-Face, and many other denizens of Arkham, because he went there at the end of last issue to beat answers out of people. I love Mahnke's art in this. You have Batman striding through the center aisle in Arkham with a bloody glove. Batman is rendered frequently in 2 different primary ways in terms of the cape, either with a cape that sits on the shoulders or with a cape that drapes directly down off the back of his neck. Mahnke chooses to draw him in this issue with the cape extending from the bottom of the neck out towards the shoulders, which is my preferred look. And so it looks really good. There's a really touching moment here in the opening sequence. Have you been reading Teen Titans, Stephen? Oh, Stephen, you there? Okay, so every once in a while at the beginning of the podcast, Stephen's PC sometimes freezes up in Hangouts, and so he sometimes has to rejoin. So, interestingly, Damon is in a slightly different suit. It's a little less aggressive, I want to say, than I've seen in previous renders. He looks a little more calm and relaxed and reserved, which may be this arc that we've seen him cutting ever since like the closing months of the New 52, where his exposure to other heroes in the DC universe, and in this instance, his recent role as the leader of the Teen Titans may have, I don't want to say softened him, but may have humanized him a little bit more. And so there's a touching moment here where Bruce says that, when this is over, the two of them have to talk and clear the air between them. However, like I said, we're reading a lot of Batman, and it's a little bit confusing to me because over in the pages of the main Batman book, of course, we just had an issue last week where Batman has been captured and is beaten up by Pig, but it's a Pig who is far more effective in hand-to-hand combat than we would expect the actual villain Pig to be. And at the end, although Batman is delirious at that point, what he believes he sees, and we see through his eyes, I guess, is a person takes off the costume, and that person is Damian. So I don't know where quite we are in continuity or which Damian is the right one. But at any rate, this issue eventually brings Bruce into conflict with Henri Ducard. The two of them have a conversation. Batman wondering if he's been the one who has been behind the assault on his life. They're attacked by some monster, which I have never seen before, but a beast which appears to be an aggregation of a lot of Batman's key enemies. And out of this conflict, even though Henri Ducard also apparently dies, Batman comes to the realization that what is going on is that whoever this enemy is, they're systemically going through and taking off the board the people who were involved in the creation or transition, if you will, of Bruce Wayne to Batman. So we have Leslie Tompkins murdered. We have Alfred. He attempted to murder Alfred. We have the person who taught Bruce Wayne to hunt and to be a great tracker, also murdered. We get to a point where I have some problems with the art in this, and I had 3 gigs against it, and only 2 of them turned out to be valid. And maybe one is still a bit of a storytelling thing. So Bruce takes off for the mountains of China, or North Korea, and he's in the snowsuit, which we saw rendered recently in the main Batman book. And there's some inconsistencies here, which are really surprising to me from Monkey, is we have points where we see Batman with the snow goggles on, and obviously these snow goggles, they're kind of larger, almost Spider-Man costume-like big eye plates over his eyes. And in many panels, he has them on and then he has them off, like in the next panel. And obviously these are not a thing which you can quickly take on and off. There is a point where he's about to fight someone and he drops his utility harness. I thought it was actually his utility belt, and then in the next panel he still has his utility belt on, and that's because the camera isn't pulled back sufficiently for you to see that it's just the harness. It's not the whole utility belt, but all you can see is that it's a belt of some type with a bunch of little equipment packets on it, and you could easily be misled, I think, to believe that it is the utility belt. And then there were some other little bits and pieces of the snowsuit where there's clearly some extra like padding and things on the snowsuit to help keep him warm, particularly in the shoulder area. And then he has them on in one panel, he has them off in the next panel, and then they're back on. The cape, as I mentioned, flows down around the shoulders, and then it looks different. So it's just in this one particular section, but I was like, what happened here? He in the snowsuit, he has like a scarf around his neck, and then again that is also gone. But we take out the issue. We end the issue very nicely with Batman going to track down and find the original Miracle Man, who's the one who taught Bruce Wayne how to be a great escape artist, which again we saw depicted and referenced in the most recent issue of Batman. So I really liked the story in this that Tomasi is weaving. It's a lot of intrigue. It's very much like, the world's greatest detective kind of stuff. I really love the character interaction between Bruce and Damian, and a little bit between Bruce, Damian, and Alfred, even though Alfred is knocked out. Overall, I really like how the story is structured. Again, it's confusing to me because there is a person in Detective Comics who's attempting to deconstruct Batman, and a very similar thing is going on over in the main Batman book. So again, what I think overall at DC, what I kind of sometimes lose clarity on is what is the strategy of their direction with particular characters. Do we need two stories that are so similar in ilk being told in two different Batman books? And in some cases, it hit points. There are points where it crosses, and you're like, but it seems like they're acknowledging like the events of each comic, but in both Batman and Detectives comics. So at the end of the day, I gave this issue a 7.0. What really kind of bothered me were the artistic and storytelling errors in the mountain scene in North Korea. It was a thing where I'm just kind of plowing through the book, really enjoying myself, and then I hit those like 3 to 5 pages, and I stop and I flip back and forth, and I'm like, wait, what's going? Like, am I seeing things? Did he have this part of the costume on in one like? So that was just really kind of jarring and shocked me out of it. By the same token, there's a bit of a friction of effect from not being clear on like what story is being told between the multiple Batman books and which one is the, I don't know if you will, the core story. It's a very weird thing to have Peter Tomasi telling a story that is so similar to the story that Tom King is telling over in the Batman book. And in fact, in many ways, is kind of unfolding in the same manner. So, but it was enjoyable. I didn't dislike that I read this, but at the end of the day, like I said, I only settled on giving it a 7.0. Stephen, did you? I know you may have been blanked out on comms there for a while.
Yeah, it was just the computer shut off.
Sorry.
It's okay.
But did you have any quick thoughts or opinions on Detective Comics number 996?
Yeah, I gave it a 7.5.
Okay.
And I thought it was okay. I didn't like it as much as last issue. And the conversation with Batman and Harry Ducar was kind of weird because he didn't actually admit any. He said that he has nothing to do with what's going on with Alfred or who's hunting him down, but it seemed like he didn't totally admit it. Like he just was hesitant about admitting what was going on, and it was just a weird conversation they had there. Didn't That didn't go out so smoothly, and then Batman going to the sensei that's from. I heard he's from. I noticed it's the character from Batman the animated series, and yeah, it's the first time he's been on the comic books, which I caught that in a news article, and the conversation was very brief. It wasn't very. It wasn't developed. It was kind of rushed at the end. Yeah, it was this book. This issue wasn't as engaging as the other one. I don't know. I just didn't enjoy it as much.
Yeah, and I think I kind of felt the same way. It was very the opening pages I felt were very strong, and then it started to. And again, I always love when we get to see like the in disguise Bruce Wayne, looking completely differently from the way he looked. And I can't remember who there was a. Well, I guess it's like a Sherlock Holmes shtick, is what it always reminds me of. But then, like I said, it just kind of I didn't necessarily fully unravel, but it just didn't. The middle game and end game were not as strong, I felt, as the opening. So, so Stephen, can you talk to us about Titans number 33? I'm very interested to hear your opinions on this since I also read that comic.
Yeah. So, where like um. All right, it's the first one. I was like looking for it. Um, it's Titans number 33, written by Dan Abnett. Art is by Bruno Redondo. Colorist is High Fly, and letters is Dave Sharp. Um, So yeah, this issue is going from the last issue where the the Titans decide to go to this alternate Earth called the Unearth, which is an Earth that was created by some new metahuman, and they go in there to find Raven's soul self, and they fight a whole bunch of demons. There's also some conversations with uh one of the it's one of the characters that
I don't,
that
I don't know his name, but he's kind of like
yeah,
their.
he looks like a Malekith type of character. I'm trying to figure out what his name is. I don't know what his name is. Um, and whatever. He's talking to Mother Blood, and he also has conversations with the creator of the universe as well. The metahuman that created on Earth. They have some conversations, and there's also like an apprentice that the like some woman with a that's like pretty much has a big stature, like a big body build. I forgot her name too, but he's talking about how wonderful her character design is, and he didn't even create her, and he's intrigued by her design and wondering where she comes from. They have conversations, and after the Titans fight the demons, they end up fighting. They end up doing and yeah, I think they just have some more conversations, and Rubel is actually helping them out. Even though he's in Earth, he's actually helping them out with a book in his hand, and they try to look for the soul self, and they end up reaching to fighting the soul. I mean, to finding the soul self at the end when they fight a whole bunch of more demons coming after them, and they end up they end up being knocked down, and they find out one of the mysterious women that was with the creator of the universe ends up being Raven's soul self, actually. And she looks, I don't know, she looked like she's either mind controlled or possessed it or some type of evil that's on her. So I gave this issue 8.5. I really did enjoy it. There was some nice conversations, and I did I did like the battle scenes with the Titans fighting the demons, and I did enjoy the quips that Kyle Rhino was actually saying. I actually like the yeah, I really was talking to their talking their language, and Beast Boy says Kyle Shore is developing bad habits, and I thought that was pretty funny what Beast Boy said, but for some reason they didn't find it so funny. But yeah, it was the humor was really funny in here, and I really saw it in Kyle Reiner. It was pretty nice to see that, and I don't know, the conversations that they had were pretty enjoyable, and it was very fun and entertaining book. So I gave it an 8.5. Yeah.
Very cool. So I gave a score that wasn't too far off from yours. I gave it a 7.5, but I did have some specific issues with it, particularly in the opening. For some reason, I'm having a hard time finding. So there's a point. There's a lot of uh, dialogue in the opening where Kyle Rayner, asks, "Hey, is this a typical day for you guys?" and or he says, "Oh, this is really cool," and Beast Boy is like, well, this is just an average day for the Teen Titans. I'm like, Kyle Rayner is a member of the Green Lantern Corps. He has been the White Lantern, of which there's only ever been and can be only be one, as far as I understand. Like, Kyle Rayner has seen plenty of stuff, right? Like, I get that maybe he's never particularly traveled to this individual dimension, but the notion of him being on the Titans and the Titans treating him like he's the new kid on the block doesn't really ring very true.
Yeah, I agree with that part. I just ignored it because it was the only flaw I kind of did see in there.
Right. And then Miss Martian's character, in addition to just being drawn far more mature than she usually is by this artist, Abbott has done something where he has seemingly kind of aged her and kind of pointed her a little bit more in the direction of like a John Jones, where she is much more focused and kind of hardened. And I don't mind that, but it's weird when, like, just an issue or two ago, she was kind of portrayed as being at the same maturity level as the Titans, and now it's almost like her voice is being written so that she would actually be in that role of being the Justice League member who was assigned to have oversight of the Titans. So I found that kind of a weird kind of pivot with her character. It just seems like 2 issues ago, or over the last 2 issues, she's been written at like the same age as the Titans, and it seems like in this issue she's being written with a slightly older voice, and that kind of, it took me a little bit off guard. But and for those reasons, I mean, specifically, I mean, that's where it dropped down below that 8.0 level that I kind of feel like I reserve for books that are like in that extra special category. But other than that, I really liked it as well. I like the twist with the leader of the Evil Dimension Battle Corps being Raven, and so somehow there's 2 corporeal representations of Raven.
Yeah.
But then there's also the third one that is her, that's non-corporeal, which is her soul. And then and then I kind of
that confused me, that there's one that's locked up and there's one that's leader of those demon things, and then there's Raven.
Yeah. And I also didn't really like the Donna Troy line about like, and some of the Titans actually called her on it, of like, oh well, now with what did she say, with Kyle Rayner and Miss Martian in the fold, like now we're a powerful team, and just like,
oh yeah, she kind of slammed
completely like dissing,
and Steel got offended by that.
Yeah, and I mean that was kind of neat, but I guess what was confusing about it from a storytelling perspective is we've been, first of all, Miss Martian has been there. It's not like she's a new addition to the team. But the other thing is we've been painting this picture of Donna Troy kind of growing into this position of leadership, and maybe it was done to show that even though she's growing into that position, she's still fallible. But I mean, it's kind of just not what you say to your team when they're on a war campaign, like in another dimension, right? It's just to say, oh well, thank goodness these 2 members are here to rescue the rest of you schlubs. So it was, I don't know, the whole thing.
I can see where you're coming from. I do remember it now that you mentioned it, and I do agree with you those points. I just still somehow enjoyed, even though there was some conversation flaws.
Yeah, and yes, and overall, I absolutely enjoyed the a 7.5 for me is that book where if you just tweaked 1 or 2 things, you'd be up in the 8.0 category. Mm-hmm. So let's move on and talk about Red Hood Outlaw number 30. I will say a book that I was slightly happier with than Titans. So here in this issue, we have Jason Todd proceeding on into Mexico, trying to fulfill the pact that he and Roy Harper had made, Roy having passed away in Heroes in Crisis while he was in rehab. Red Hood has been on the trail of this gang who's producing some synthetic drug, it has taken him to some small town out in the Midwest, probably, where he runs into Batwoman, who has not really been seen from since she rode off into the sunset with her fiancee Maggie Sawyer. But there's all this discussion of various people that he's running into, attempting to take him back to Gotham. What was really neat in this issue is we got to get a bit of a peek at where Bizarro and Artemis are, the two of them having been sucked into another dimension at the end of the Red Hood and the Outlaws series of arcs, and what was the beginning of the Red Hood Outlaw arc. I love Bizarro in here with the beard in the close cut crew cut, almost like a mohawk, in the Superman like tank top t-shirt. I thought that was pretty cool. He is drawn well. Wasn't really pleased with how Artemis was rendered. By the way, the talent on this, writer Scott Lobdell, art by Pete Woods, colors by Rex Locus, and letters by Troy. I have Petrie written down. I think it's actually slightly different. I just want to give him the right credit. Troy Petrie. So again, Jason Todd continues his trek down into Mexico. He finally runs into, I don't know that they ever tell us this character's name, but he's some kind of weird mix between Batman and Azrael and the Blue Falcon. It's a very Batman-esque motif costume. But strangely enough, we all think that this has been brewing for the last few issues, and we all think that we're finally going to get to see the Royal Rumble between these two. But what actually happens is, number one, this guy paints himself as actually a fan, a groupie of Jason Todd's, who actually wants him to go back to Gotham because he feels like Gotham needs Jason Todd. But then we also have this guy immediately get taken out by Bricks. There's a lot of pages of Jason like wandering through the jailhouse then and discussing the mystery that's been going on. And then the weird thing is that then at the end of the book, who he finds in there is Bunker, who, as far as I know, the only time I've seen Bunker was at the very end of the New 52 run of Teen Titans.
Yes, I remember that too.
Yeah, and so he was in with the Titans at the time, right before we cut over to Rebirth. Very modern character. I don't know again that he's been seen that much. And then we have him run into who has been painted as the whole mastermind of this whole campaign, a villain named Solitary, whose either head moves very rapidly from left to right, or who actually has three faces. Interestingly enough, this whole arc of Jason Todd's life started with him trying to track down and determine the story behind his father, a path that was kind of rolled out at his feet by the Penguin, and then determines that the Penguin was responsible for his downfall. Interestingly enough, when we catch up to this character Solitary, he calls Jason son. Now Jason just quickly brushes that off and doesn't really even pay attention to it or acknowledge it. But I'm wondering if Lobdell is going somewhere with that. It would be very interesting if this were actually Jason Todd's father, who had become this criminal mastermind of the underworld, and I'd be curious to see how that impacts Jason and how he handles it. So it was a very weird book. At this point, though, in my stack, I guess I hit this about midway through my stack, and other than Black Widow #1, I hadn't really read anything that had really grabbed me. And so while a large part of this comic is, and also art art overall this week was not nearly as strong as it was last week. I actually felt like this was a week of, like, I don't want to say poor art, but more problematic art. Um, and actually at this point, when I read this comic, at least I was pretty pleased with the work of Pete Woods. So so like I mentioned, I wound up giving this comic an 8.0, despite the fact that there's a large passage where he's just wandering through the jail, and we leave on a slightly confused note, not really sure exactly where the story is going to head. I was also a little bit disappointed by his interaction with this guy who's been tracking him for the last several issues, again, kind of setting us up to believe that this was going to be the big fight, and then the guy, again, being a proponent of Jason Todd's and also quickly being taken out by a bunch of flying bricks. So, Steven, did you read this issue?
I did. It's just I don't know, but I'm not really liking this series anymore. Since it's since Artemis and Bizarro left the book, I've not been enjoying Red Hood and the Outlaws, and I've been contemplating every time it comes out whether I should just pick it up or not. And I did pick up this one, and I um I didn't enjoy it that much. I gave it a 6.0. It's just I don't I don't like the art from Pete Woods. I think it's very undetailed and kind of sloppy for me. That's just my opinions. So but I I do like the plot twist that at the end that I think Red Hood's be fighting his actual father. I think Solidarity's probably Jason Todd's father. And I am glad to see Bunker around now, because the last time we saw him was in that Teen Titans series, and he's not appeared in anywhere else after that. He's in comic book limbo. He was in comic book limbo for a very long time, and it's like no one knows what happened to him until now.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, there's something I was going to say about it. I wonder again. So I will again go back to a book that we both read. That when I look at it, I have different feelings about the book, and you have different feelings about the book. But what really comes out of it is my question of what is DC Comics doing with this character in their universe? And quite honestly, I feel like I'm starting to get the sense like the only mission, right, that the creative team has been given for Jason Todd is just keep him out of Gotham, right? It seems like there's this thing going on with the sidekicks, and there's this thing going on with repositioning members of the Batman family, and I kind of feel like we don't really care what you guys do, just write stories that that keeps him out of Gotham. And I'm like, well, at a certain point, that's going to kind of hamstring the creative team from maybe doing things that they want to do, and we're going to wind up getting some kind of contrived content. But I mean, it is what it is. So let's move out of the big two. Interestingly enough, we are not talking about any Marvel books, at least in the review segment this week.
Yeah.
Everything from here on out is all tier 2 and tier 3 publishers and below. So why don't we start off that part of the review segment by you talking to us about Shadowman number 11. Now, is this the final issue?
Yeah, it's the final issue of the series. I do want to give a shout out to Greg Kaxman. Is a guy I've been friends with for a long time. He's working for Valiant now as a marketing director, and I'm happy for him to get the job there. I just I'm gonna talk about Shadowman 11. It is from Valiant. It's written by Andy Diggle, um, Ronaldo Guendez, and Eric Battle. There's two artists in this book, Ronaldo Guendez and Eric Battle. The colorist is Ucelis Areola, and the letter is Simon Boland. And this issue is you see that Shadowman and his girlfriend Elisa are continue to fight Sandria, which is Dark's sister, and they're fighting, and they actually do get to defeat her and trap her in the Dead Side world, and they grab Dark's bones, and they uh they try to hide the bones in some secret facility away from the Brethren, which is a organization that's trying to look for Dark's bones to use it for something. And um they end up tricking Shadowman and Elisa because they thought that they were in the facility, and they met up with some man that could protect the Dark's bones, and they find out that they weren't. It was just a trick from the Brethren to try to get the Dark Bones, and they Shadowman ends up fighting um Dark Bones. He gets out of Dead Side, and he ends up fighting the Brethren, but for some reason the fight cuts off. The fight doesn't even finish in the book, and it just jumps forward to Baron Samedi talking to Shadowman, talk about how he helped them escape or something, and Shadowman was thankful for that, and he's wondering why he helped them, and Baron Samedi doesn't even answer the question and just ends the book right there. Um, I don't know, but I gave this book like a 5.0 because it just bothers me that they didn't even finish the story in here. It's just you see him gonna get ready to fight the villain, and
Okay.
are in the future.
Oh, okay. All right. Good.
Well,
You froze up for a second, so I wasn't sure if you were dropping the call or not.
no, I was talking. What did my voice still record it?
I not on my end on OBS, but quite frequently, sometimes like people on the other ends of call on Hangouts are fine, and YouTube gets it okay.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. Well,
I'll just repeat myself. But yeah, I gave it a 5.0 because I didn't like that the story cuts off when Shadowman is fighting the Brethren, like the leader of the Brethren. He just has a conversation with him, and they're gonna end up getting ready to fight, and it just cuts off, and it just goes fast forward to a different point of time, and him talking to another villain of Shadowman, like Shadowman and Baron Samedi are talking to each other, and it just threw me off, and like, what the hell is going on here? And I went to go check if I skipped any pages, and I didn't, and it was a weird cutoff point, and it's just like,
yeah.
okay, you didn't finish the storyline. This is terrible.
Yeah,
You
so
just,
I feel completely just like if you want your comic to earn a 5.0 or in that vicinity of score, then make your comic make the reader wonder whether or not they missed something. Like you're like, am I getting gaslamped? I'm pretty sure I didn't skip a page or something.
yeah, and you look
Yeah,
back, and it's like, okay, there was a cutoff point,
right.
and I didn't like that. It was just
Yeah, it makes you feel like it's
half-assed.
you, right? It makes you feel like it's you, and you're like, hold on a second. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So, okay, so Valiant not necessarily hitting it out of the park in recent months, which is really weird with their whole like movie deal and everything. That I mean, I remember a couple years ago, Valiant was
It was great back
hitting on all four cylinders,
then.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and now it was just falling apart, and I was hoping that because they said they're gonna come with a new relaunch with a whole bunch of books like Punk Mobile and um Tony Harda and some they got relaunch what is this?
Man of War.
No, not Man of War. It was the other one. I can't even think
Bloodshot.
about it. Huh?
Bloodshot.
They already relaunched Bloodshot.
Yeah.
It was one of the internal warrior.
Oh yeah,
The immortal guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they gotta relaunch Rye, which I'm hoping to read
Okay.
too. So I'm hoping I don't know, but I think after Shadowman, I'm not gonna be reading Valiant for quite a while.
Okay.
I'm picking up Livewire because that one just started and not sure how I feel about it yet. But oh man, this I don't know. It's just Valiant's not doing it for me anymore. I just
Yeah,
not enjoying it as much.
I think they unfortunately got big and then hit that point where they felt compelled to have eventitis, which is unfortunate because like the coolest thing to me about the Valiant universe was they were able to tell great stories and they were able to interweave their character stories without having to do events, because this was the point where between DC and Marvel, I was getting event fatigue. So, but now it seems they're like on the negative, on the downward swing of that whole thing and not able to kind of pull themselves out and
Yeah,
head in the direction like they used to.
I didn't like the Shadowman was fighting Sandra, because they had a good relationship in previous books, and it just seems weird that they didn't have a great relationship in this one. And I think he could have told her that someone is after the Dark Bones when you gotta hide them, but for some reason they didn't. He didn't tell her anything about that, and they just started arguing. It's just the conversations didn't flow right. It was kind of out of character for me.
Right, right. So let's step over and start talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder in Hell #1. How did you enjoy that one, Steven?
I enjoyed this very much. I like this one more than the other two. Um, the Shredder in Hell #1 is from IDW. Is written the is written by Mateus Santolaco. Apparently, he's also the artist and the colorist for this book as well. And there's another colorist. There's apparently two colorists. Is yeah, Mateus Santoloco and Marcelo Costa, and the letters is Sean Lee. That's about it. So yeah, Shredder in Hell is about Shredder is in hell. He's apparently being resurrected by I think what is it Kasune is actually trying to resurrect him. I think she wants to use him to fight Splinter for the Foot Clan, but he doesn't he doesn't get resurrected real quickly. He's still stuck in hell, and he meets up with his actual like original like version of himself that was before he got reincarnated. It was like his original persona, because apparently in this universe reincarnation exists, and before he got reincarnated his previous persona was fighting him, and after he's fighting him, all of a sudden he sees Splinter, and Splinter talks to him, and Splinter's trying to I don't know, I noticed that Splinter is trying to make him into a good person, and he's trying to like tell him that you were controlled by the dragon god. You need to stop this and forget about what the dragon god wants. Stop trying to be uh because if you go on the path of the dragon god, you're gonna want to end the world, and that's what you really don't want to do. He's trying to convince him to go on the other side, I've noticed. And he refuses, and all of a sudden Splinter turns into an actual like mouse thing, and he goes with Shredder. He first talks to his wife, and he mentions that he still loves I think Splinter's wife, but he doesn't see her, and so Spencer decides to turn into a little mouse, and he goes on Shredder's shoulder, and they fight some more like Foot Clan demons, and all of a sudden they end up running into like some evil demon versions of the Ninja Turtles, and that's where it cuts off. I give this a 9.0 because I really did like the art It was pretty interesting, and the storytelling was pretty good. I liked the conversations with Shredder and Splinter. They had a very interesting conversation. I thought that was interesting that this whole entire time that reason why Shredder acts so bad, kind of evil, is because he's apparently he's influenced by the Dragon God, which I didn't know about. I thought that was pretty interesting, and I would like to learn more about the Dragon God and see why Kusune, because Kusune does mention it, and apparently that's her father, the Dragon God, and I want to know why is this Dragon God influencing Kusune and Shredder into um taking over the world and destroying everything that's on there. So I want to see what happens and see if Shredder actually gets resurrected.
Very cool. Very interesting.
Oh,
So, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I didn't give a score.
Yeah,
I gave it
sorry.
a 9.0.
Oh, wow.
That's
Okay.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, I will come back to that. So, the final book in the reviews segment is Albert Einstein, Time Mason #4 by Action Lab Entertainment. So, as you would expect, this has a little bit of a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen kind of feel to it. It's a period piece, but revisionist history, where the supposition is that Albert Einstein is the member of a core of time traveling. I don't know what you want to call them, supervisors or overseers, and his job is to make sure that things unfold in the timeline correctly. One of the things that's presented in this is that the Germans in the future are very close to being able to do a nuclear bomb. And so what apparently the Council of Time Lords, or whatever it's called, charged Albert to do was to catch this German officer before he could get back with some critical components of the things that the villains need. So this is normally the kind of thing that's a little bit kind of right up my alley. So I love period pieces. I love kind of telling histories where we kind of go through and like dork with one thing in the timeline. But this book I felt was really rough. So, and I know Action Labs Entertainment is a really small outfit, but I mean, I really the art style is very much in the style of a 1970s comic. I feel like, and it didn't really appeal to me. There's a lot of cartooniness in this, and maybe there has to be, but I found it really difficult to find myself attached to any of the art as it was rendered with the characters. So like I said, the book just kind of sort of has problems in kind of its antiquated approach, which I guess is a stylistic choice and a thing that they're trying to invoke, but I just felt like I just wasn't as interested in the story. And the big thing, I guess the really big problem I have with the whole thing is that you have the notion of Albert Einstein and some other bits and pieces, and it doesn't feel smart. It feels just like there's a ton of pop culture references in this as well. I don't feel like the Albert Einstein they portray is the Albert Einstein that was written in history. He's much more so of a MacGyver, which is fine, but I'm like, that's not what Albert Einstein should be, right? Albert Einstein should be presented as one of the foremost minds in physics, and that's what he should be bringing to bear. In this, it's just written to feel a little too much like Robert Downey Jr. A Sherlock Holmes kind of riff. And so at the end of the day, I wound up giving this book a 4.0 out of 10. And it wasn't necessarily bad. It just didn't capitalize on anything, and it felt like it just traded on the Albert Einstein name, and the shtick of the plot to make readers feel like it was coming off good. But to me, it came off decidedly kind of very flat, unfortunately. So, so that is going to do it for us for the reviews segment. Steven, did you have any questions or anything else that you were going to bring up about any of the books that we talked about in review?
I just thought that was funny when you mentioned that Albert Einstein was acting like Tony Stark. It's like it doesn't work. I mean, Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, well, not Tony Stark. I meant to say Robert Downey Jr. as Sherlock Holmes. It feels very.
Oh yeah, you did say that. I said Tony Stark by accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was definitely rambling and trying to hold on to fighting through the vestiges of a wave of sleep. So I could have very well have said Tony Stark. But yeah, it feels like it's a Sunday afternoon, like it's a Sunday morning newspaper comic strip. And maybe that's the effect that they were going for. It didn't feel like it really came off very well. So talk to me about the best thing. That was obviously, actually, it was the absolute worst thing that I read last week, unfortunately. So talk to me about the best thing that you read last week.
All right. The best thing I read was Jessica Jones' Purple Daughter #1, which is a Marvel Comics original. It's written by Kelly Thompson. The penciler is Matea De Lewis. The letterist is Corey Petit, and the graphic designer is Carter Slow. Yeah, for some reason they have a graphic designer, but they don't have a colorist. I don't know. So I decided to put that there. So yeah, this story it's coming. It continues off from the previous Marvel Comics original, which it was Kelly Thompson and the same artist as well, Matea De Lewis. It continues from the story where Jessica Jones finds out that her daughter has she's purple for some reason. Like she has the powers of Purple Man, Jebediah Kilgrave, and they're Jessica Jones and Luke Cage are shocked, and they don't feel comfortable finding out their daughter has some type of she has purple skin, and she looks like she has the effects of Kilgrave, and she goes through a lot of emotions with Luke Cage, and apparently Luke Cage decides to walk off and give himself some breathing room. Like he decides to depart from Jessica Jones and give time to himself. And also in the book, Jessica Jones decides to try to look for Kilgrave's daughter. Yeah, she finds her, and then she tries to drown her, and yeah, Jessica Jones grabs her and tries to drown her, and actually wakes her up and tries to talk to her, asking her if she knows what the hell's going on with her daughter. Does she have anything to do with this? And she finds out that the Kilgrave's daughter really has nothing to do with this. She doesn't know what the hell's going on. So what is it? She does tell her that she should go to some counseling, and like she takes her to some counseling of where other people have had experiences with Kilgrave, and yeah, they come talk together. It's like when people deal with alcohol or drug abuse, they go in a circle and talk with other people that experience the same thing. So she takes her to that place, and they talk about dealing with the experiences they had with Kilgrave and how it affected them. And for some reason, Jessica Jones doesn't feel so good talking about it. and she knows that there's one person in there that's she said that is fake, that she's not telling the truth, that she's lying, that she had any experiences with Kilgrave, and they have an argument, and she gets Jessica Jones ends up getting kicked out, and Jessica Jones ends up talking to she ends up um walking off, and she ends up seeing the girl in the alley, and she tries to run after her and tries to argue with her a little bit more, and I think Jessica Jones decided to not argue with her anymore because it just didn't help. And and Jessica Jones ends up going to a bar and talk with Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, and they have a conversation, and then they see a news report on TV talk about that the person that Jessica Jones just spoke to in the counseling center had just killed herself. She had committed suicide, like jumping off the building. And Jessica Jones thought that was weird because this girl that she was fighting apparently had powers, and she flew off when she was arguing with Jessica Jones in the alley. And she was surprised that she ended up killing herself. And um so yeah, they I'm trying to remember what's going on in the book. So yeah, it's just by the end of the book, um but the book does cut off eventually after Jessica Jones finds out about the news report about the girl committing suicide. It cuts off to like the purple children talking to some mysterious figure. They don't show the person who they're talking to, and it's is to be continued. It cuts off there. Um, this issue I gave it a 9.5. I really do like the storytelling here. It's pretty interesting to see Jessica Jones and Luke Cage go through a lot of emotions about their daughter looking a certain way. It really affects them, and I thought that was very compelling to see that. And I did feel for them going through this stage of how what they see with their daughter. And the art is very well done. I really do like the art that Matea de Lewis is drawing here. Is very well detailed. I never seen a book where art like as detailed as this book. So yeah, it's a pretty great book. I really did enjoy it, and I think Kelly Thompson's doing a very good job on writing Jessica Jones. I just wish that Luke Cage didn't have to depart away from Jessica Jones. I don't know. That's a good thing for a husband to do, to take a break of his girlfriend, his wife, if he has a daughter. I don't think it's a good solution, but I noticed in the book, it says the next issue, you do see Luke Cage and Jessica Jones on the front cover. So I guess he does end up coming back. I don't know the writer. I thought the writer was gonna get rid of Luke Cage because she probably wanted to separate. It's like, I guess because this is a Jessica Jones book. She didn't want to probably feel contrived to actually write Luke Cage since they're a couple now. But I don't. I do like seeing superheroes when they are a couple actually being together and actually try to have a life together. I really don't like it when they try to separate the couple. You know, they're like, I don't know, for some reason writers have a difficulty writing characters that are with someone. I've noticed in a lot of books. But I actually enjoyed this book a lot, and I'm hoping to see more of it. Yeah.
All right, very cool. For me, the best thing that I read last week, amazingly and surprisingly, wound up being Justice League Dark #7. This is a comic that is not firmly in my wheelhouse. It's interesting, but I guess my feeling about Justice League Dark is that it's been too dark and doesn't really like always fit within DC's continuity. But this issue, written by James Tynion IV with pencils by Alvin Martinez Buena, inks Raul Fernandez, colors Brad Anderson, and Rob Lay on letters. This book, the thing that makes it stand out to me is it is a really awesome and well-written horror comic. This issue features the Man-Bat sitting at a nightstand, going over notes that he's been taking, and I guess stories that he's been making up about this demonic threat to mankind called the Other Kind, who have apparently already made their incursion into this dimension and are operating. Basically, the theory is that they're going around trying to make new horror stories that people will see and hear about, and then wind up going back and telling others, because apparently the entrenchment of these characters in our dimension increases when they become the nightmares of residents of this dimension. And so the comic is kind of written like a good old-fashioned pulp fiction, Tales of the Crypt kind of story. It's these chapters of short stories that are like 5 pages a piece. And there's I think only in the last one are actually any members of the Justice League there. It was awesome to get to see the Agents of Shade, led by Frankenstein, which the small amount of them that I've read, I think it's a pretty awesome concept, and those characters come off really well. So it was very cool seeing them. It's absolutely amazing art. So what Alvin Martinez, really the whole creative team is doing, it's just a bang up instance of really incredible creature art that I hope winds up being in a comic that's. I mean, I know everybody knows about Justice League Dark #7. I just don't know how many people are reading it.
Yeah, I'm actually reading it. I remember.
Yeah, no. Yeah, and I know you are. It's always historically been kind of one of those just barely above the niche factor in terms of sales, and so the creature art in this book is really good. I'm hoping that this creative team or some pieces of it are able to take that talent elsewhere if Justice League Dark ever comes to an end. So I really like how Tynion IV tells all these little vignettes of horror stories. They're very well paced and plotted, and like I said, the entire creative team's art along with it is just top notch and pretty amazing. So I think I wound up scoring this an 8.5. There were several comics. There were 3 comics specifically in my stack that all kind of wound up tying for an 8.5. So I could have gone with either one of them. The other comics that were in consideration were Fantastic Four #6 and the Batman Who Laughs #2. At the end of the day, I wound up going with this one because I just felt like it was tonally just perfect. So, Steven, talk me through and run me down your honorable. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I want to talk about Justice League Dark because I did read it and I actually enjoyed it too. Like, I gave it a 9.0. I did like the whole. It did feel like Tales from the Crypt just thinking about it when Man-Bat was talking with the book and I did enjoy seeing iVampire Andrew Bennett because I haven't seen him for a very long time since his book came out, and I know he was in Justice League Dark briefly in the previous volumes, but he didn't have much screen time in there, and I'm glad that I was able to see more of him, and it was a pretty interesting story. I did like it a lot. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I felt it was pretty top notch myself as well. So why don't you go ahead and run me down your list of honorable mentions from last week?
Um, my honorable mentions is Black Widow #1, which was a story with Black Widow, with Captain America going after fake Captain America and taking him down, and she also goes off Madripoor and meets someone there to help. I gave it an 8.0. Ironheart #2, I gave it an 8.5. It was about Ironheart discovering kids being kidnapped. It's also like Miles Morales was going through is kids being kidnapped and being used for something, but we find out is one of Ironheart's longtime friends that was in school when she was younger that helped her from being bullied. Apparently, she's apparently captured by some type of villain. Um, I gave Man Without Fear #3 at 8.0. It deals with Daredevil being handicapped, not be able to walk, and he talks with defenders to try to get him out of it. And he also deal with a past story with Fool Killer. Um, I thought it was interesting mental thing that's Matt Murdock is going through with fear. Marvel Comics presents #1. I gave it an 8.0. It deals with a story with Wolverine and some type of World War II past. They also have a story with Namor and the Hiroshima, which I thought was interesting. They also have a Captain America story with a little girl and riding up her motorcycle and trying to convince the mother to in, appreciate that her daughter's into that stuff. I gave Electro Wars #3 at 8.0. It was a story about the tournaments. They have races of people fighting for each other to keep the races alive. I thought it was some interesting to learn about the characters and learn about the leader that's controlling the gladiator warriors. I gave Hawkman #8, 8.5. I really did want to talk about this issue, but I didn't get to because I wanted to talk about Shadowman. This is the final issue. I didn't have to talk about Shadowman when I talked about this one. It deals with Hawkman um, talking to his Kryptonian self and seeing what he experienced in Krypton. I give it an 8.5. House of Whispers #5. I forgot. I noticed I forgot to put the numbers in there. Yes, House of Whispers #5. I gave it an 8.0. It deals with the kids being captured by some demon and apparently one of the whispers fight it off and uh I noticed that I'm trying to remember the story but I don't remember fully. I gave it an 8.0. I actually enjoyed it. Scoopy Apocalypse, I gave a 8.5. Apparently I forgot to put the issue number there, but it does deal with um apparently Freddy is back alive and it deals with Velma's brother, and they find out that they've been working with a lot of ways to cure the zombie virus and try to move forward. I thought that was interesting. Supergirl #26, I gave it an 8.5 as well. You see her fighting some type of Nazi person that wants to experiment her, and she tries to escape, and now she has to fight the soldier, one of the generals that's there. The Flash #62, I gave it an 8.0. It deals with Flash meaning the Psyche, which is a guy from the Sage Force. We get to learn about him. I thought that was interesting, and apparently he was working for somebody else. We find out, and it was a I was thought it was a pretty interesting book. That's about it.
All right, cool. One thing that I wanted to mention that I didn't get to mention is, and I can't remember who did you say? So Kelly Thompson, you mentioned, was the writer on Jessica Jones. She's Also the writer who's captaining Captain Marvel in her new ongoing as well.
I just a Scooby called Apocalypse number 33. I just wanted to mention. All right, go ahead.
Okay, and for my honorable mentions, I also scored Black Widow number 1 in 8.0. And so that made the honorable mentions list. We talked about Red Hood Outlaw number 30. That was a comic that I scored in 8.0 as well. Fantastic Four number 6, being written by Dan Slott, joined this month on art by Aaron Cooter, who I knew predominantly from his run on Action Comics.
Yeah, Action Comics. I was going to mention that.
Yeah, I thought he was part of that great pack run, and I thought he was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I did like his art there.
Yep, and a pretty amazing cover by Esad Ribic. So Fantastic Four number 6, I scored an 8.5, and it was definitely strongly in the running to be my best thing that I read this week. And finally, The Batman Who Laughs number 2 by 8.5, the other comic that was in the running to be declared the best thing that I read this week, by Scott Snyder, Jock, and David Brown. Let's go ahead and move along and start running down our pulls for next week. It is a pretty lengthy list, and we are trying to push on to get out of here. So Batman number 63, Immortal Hulk number 12, Justice League number 16, Star Wars number 60, Superior Spider-Man number 2, I'm very much looking forward to. I am going to take a trip through Antarctic Press, a third or fourth tier publisher, and check out some of their comics. Punchline number 3 and William the Last number 4. Replacing, unfortunately, in my opinion, we'll maybe reserve some of that judgment until I actually read the comic, but replacing a series that has always been a big favorite of mine, Spectacular Spider-Man, is Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Next week, we will see issue number 2, and I will be picking that up in my stack. And Uncanny X-Men Annual number 1, Shazam number 2, Sideways number 12, Guardians of the Galaxy number 1, and Lucifer number 4. Steven, what are you going to be pulling next week?
I'm going to be pulling Star Wars number 60, Justice League number 16, Outcast number 38, Uncanny X-Men Annual number 1, Shazam number 2, Guardians of the Galaxy number 1, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 90, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man number 2, Superior Spider-Man number 2, Sideways number 12, Man Without Fear number 4, Pearl number 6, Lucifer number 4, Freedom Fighters number 2, The Curse of Brimstone Annual number 1, cover number 5, Naomi number 1, which is a Wonder Comics book, a new character for Bendis, American Carnage number 3, Crypts of Shadows number 1, which is one of Marvel's old books that they apparently relaunched, is a one-shot, and Livewire number 2 from Valiant, Teen Titans Go number 32, and another Marvel book that Marvel is doing one-shots of is War is Hell number 1. That's about it.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for joining in on this episode of What's Your Issue. This has been episode number 15, recounting our opinions and views on the comics that shipped the last New Comic Book Day on the 16th of January. Coming up, the next New Comic Book Day on the 23rd of January, where we will be reading the books that we just ran down on our pull list. If you have any questions for us or have comics that you want us to check out, please hit us up on the Twitter account at E2KG Network. You can find Stephen Laura under Ultimate Awesomeness in various places in social media, and look for the podcast submitted under his brand on iTunes. Under the E2KG brand, you can find the episode on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Pocket Casts. So thanks so much for joining in, everybody. It was a jam-packed week full of comics. It'll be another jam-packed week next week. On behalf of the E2KG Network and Mr. Stephen Laura, thanks for listening in. Take care of yourselves, and good night. We are out of here.
All right.